Hello and welcome back to Roadmap, Autotrader's product and technology podcast. I'm joined on the sofa today by Tom and Dustin from our data science and analytics community. And both Tom and Dustin had super interesting careers in academia before joining Autotrader. So to start with, Tom, Dustin, I wonder if you could introduce yourselves and tell us a bit about the journey that you've been on that brought you to Autotrader.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Tom, principal data scientist at Autotrader, but before all that, my focus and interest was very much all about, space. Going right back, like really early back, as like a little child, I remember like my dad taped the Planets documentary from like the 90s or so. Like that and Walking with Dinosaurs was like my main fodder growing up. And so that carried all the way through to university, studied astrophysics, and then went on to do a PhD in astrophysics, specifically intergalactic astrophysics, so simulating galaxy clusters. and then basically my supervisor was like, right, we need to weigh these as accurately as possible. And the problem with the galaxy cluster is that it's like 5% galaxy and 80% dark matter, which is completely invisible. So it's a slight problem. And these structures are literally like, you can't get bigger. Like there has not been enough time in the 13 billion plus years of the universe existence to grow any structure larger than these things. So that was like, go and weigh that, that'd be fine. And I got into kind of machine learning on that route, being fairly early on in trying to apply that. And then, that was my route into data science, like getting a handle on those techniques. And then, I ended up here.
I feel like that could be a podcast episode in its series in itself. Tom, thank you. And Dustin, how about yourself?
I'm Dustin. I'm a data scientist here. And for my PhD, I built playgrounds for mice and then threw food at them to get them to move around. I was also recording from their brain while doing it, but it's more fun to say we just kind of threw food at while they played in a jungle gym. We were briefly considering teaching them to drive a car, which is a great Autotrader full circle moment, but they couldn't operate the joysticks well enough. So,
and that was in neuroscience?
This was neuroscience, yes. So the journey throughout all this has been quite odd. I started as a young kid. I just liked taking things apart, and then people would get mad at me, so I had to learn how to put them back together. Always kind of delved me into science and engineering and a little bit of stuff like that. Through one way or another, I always get back into biology and stuff, things more applied, and so I would get into neuroscience. Brought me to Norway, of all places, where I did the fun experiments with rats and playgrounds. And then I contacted someone randomly on Reddit, and that person happened to be one of the tech directors here at Autotrader, and then I happened to get an interview and then a job through talking with that. So I'm here because of Reddit, I guess.
So, I mean, you've both spent time in academia in like very different environments to the one which we are now in. It'd be great if you could reflect on like what do you feel like the differences or similarities between like academia and then a big commercial FTSE 100 technology company.
Cool. I guess like within like a PhD office, like the depth that people are studying things to is just like it's fantastic, but it's also slightly scary because like I would do my galaxy cluster simulations, but then the person next to me is doing like properly scary deep maths on like early like theoretical cosmology, and I'm looking over my shoulder. I don't have a clue. Like the equations are just like they get to pages long, and you're like, I don't know that. And then the person next to them is basically trying to model the sun and how the sun works, right? And so like we're all like in our really like own, almost like a bubble, almost. So, like we're doing one thing really deeply, and then like it doesn't cross over as much, as opposed to like in a tech company, obviously, right? You've got an overall unifying goal that you're driving towards, and you can have very different skill sets and the same thing, but like you're all kind of driving towards the same thing, and that feels quite different. It's quite nice as well because it's like, oh, I've got a thing that's not working, well, I've got a developer right next to me. That's handy, and you can work on things. So yeah, that feels like a bit of a difference. I don't know, Dustin.
It's a shared common knowledge pool where everyone's working together towards roughly the same goal. I think in academia you're more siloed, and it's a lot more collaborative in the tech space.
So would you be working on your your kind of project or your research or your postdoc or whatever, are you like working independently for large periods of that time?
Yeah. Often in like a basement of some awful building, right?
Yeah, it would be like, well, sometimes I would go and like teach in like the labs, like the undergrad physics labs. But the problem is that, we're doing like laser experiments and you're literally just in a black room all day. And then, you arrive there and the sun's down because it's winter, and you go in and it's blackness all day, and then you come out and the sun's down and you go home. I mean, I know yours was similar.
Yeah, I mean, it's Norway, so in the winter it's like, oh, there's the sun. Oh, it's gone again. So you see it and greet it as it passes by. But then you go down into like the second level of a basement in Trondheim, Norway, and it's just a 9-hour brain surge on a rat, and then they slowly wake up, then you put them in a playground, and then you record for 3 hours. And then you forget that the public bus schedule stops at like 2 a.m., so you have to walk up the mountain back to your home. So, there's also ice everywhere because it's Norway. So.
And presumably, like, the pace of these things must be very different in that, I mean, these projects must have lasted several years, whereas in a commercial environment, we might say, we've made a commitment to deliver this thing in X period of time, so it needs to be, the timings that we set will drive how much can be done at what level of robustness.
Yeah, I guess within academia, your core like unit of work is a paper, and that paper must be extremely comprehensive. You need to preempt pretty much anything that a mean-spirited reviewer might think of and like poke holes in. And so, the thing that you produce at the end is so comprehensive. Whereas within an industry, like there's often a lot of things and decisions where it's like you cannot know a priori which one is correct, right? You need to get out into the environment, you need to test, you need to see how it works, you need to work with others as well, because what you're doing impacts what other people are doing and vice versa, so much so that you have a lot more kind of back and forth and a lot more like iteration. Yeah,
there's more easy, simple steps to make forward to know there's progress being made, and then when there's a deadline you can say we've gotten further enough or far enough there to just say, okay, good enough, let's pivot to something else. Or maybe it's like, oh, there's something here, we should dig deeper. And so it's this nice iterative process of keep poking a little bit as opposed to make sure it's all neatly packed into one thing.
Yeah, I guess it's not just right, but like robustly defensible.
Yeah.
So the main reason that we wanted to invite you on today, as well as to hear about your like fascinating academic background, was just to talk a bit about the paper that you wrote recently and presented. So I'm going to try and pronounce it, and then I'd like a round of applause for that. And then you can correct me on that, and then we can maybe explain to a non-statistician like myself what that means. So the paper was a straightforward Bayesian A/B testing with Dirichlet posteriors. I don't think I've ever seen some of those words before, let alone put them together in a sentence.
Yeah, so I guess as the title says, it's straightforward, so it's fine, right?
Well, it's the first word, so it must be.
So this is all about our approach to A/B testing. So A/B testing is essentially, like if you've spent any time on the internet, right, you've been involved in many A/B tests across whatever sites that you visit. It's basically a way for us to test, like, is this idea that we've had, is it working, is it doing the thing that we want or not? Actually, something that carries over, I think, from academia is like always be careful with your instincts and gut feel, because often you can be led astray. Like a whole PhD is very good at teaching you how many ideas that you have are actually a bit wrong and a bit rubbish. And so it's always good to be able to get some data to validate that and test yes, this works well. So an A/B test is kind of the gold standard. You put the change out live to a proportion of people and you see how they react to it compared to what you currently have. So that's great, you can get a number, but you need to get some sense of how confident you are with that number. And that's where the real difficulty gets in. And so often with A/B testing, you look at just the aggregates. So just like the means and whatnot, but that can really hide what's going on underneath. So I actually have some props, which I've not shown in this at all, but I'd like you to just, what does this plot look like? What does it remind you of?
It looks like lots of blue or black dots that are strongly correlated and lots of red dots that are strongly correlated. I can't see what's on the axis.
It's just numbers.
So lots of the ones at the bottom feel like they're the same, similar, and lots of the ones at the top feel like they're similar.
Now, I have been cheeky, and I've actually, the colours don't really mean much in this scenario. I've just coloured it to kind of look like the Autotrader logo, but not quite. But I would like to
So I
ask...
failed the first test.
Yeah. well, okay. So the second question may be a bit harder. I want you to tell me what is similar between the Autotrader logo and the dinosaur.
They are both red and blue dots.
Yeah. Anything else?
Not to my eye, no.
Well, I've got 12 other plots that all look, very red and blue. But I guess to throw it out to the audience, is there anything here that might look similar? Like what makes these similar?
Number of dots.
Same number of dots. They've got a similar property as well. They all, if you were to just run this through some standard statistical tests, they all have the same average. They all have the same standard deviation. They all have the same correlation.
That's fascinating.
But if you just, did your standard stat stuff, never looked at the data, right? You just aggregate it, you would miss that you've got a dinosaur in your data.
Which would be really upsetting.
Which and also be a little bit embarrassing. Right? And so this is kind of one of the core problems, like when you work with aggregations of data, right? You miss what's going on underneath, and that can be really important. So obviously, these are toy examples. This is actually called the Datasaurus Rex database. It's one of my favorite toy databases.
What's your favorite toy database?
But so obviously, these are nice toy examples. But this is actually something that looks more like the data that we would actually see in practice. And I don't know if, Dustin, you want to explain?
It's very similar in the sense that these two data sets, despite looking very different, have the exact same mean and the exact same variance. And so if I were to do an A/B test and say, oh, these two things are the same in terms of their average, I might tell someone something that's maybe not the full story. It indicates that I have to dig deeper. It indicates that there might be something there that we're missing. But trying to make a distribution for this, trying to do statistics on that kind of grossness there is quite hard. And so we created a framework that allows us to generalize and approximate what that might look like. And so that is where the title of the paper comes in, for this generalized approximation framework for A/B testing. We figured out a way, we rediscovered it, it was discovered 40 years ago, that you can take any gross-looking data set you have, approximate it, and then get some really nice statistics out of it that allows you to say, we shouldn't just look at the mean or the variance or the correlation, we shouldn't ignore the dinosaur, and instead we can look at it and appreciate the full data. And then from there we can go into stakeholders and say, yes, there's the same mean, but maybe we need to look at some other aspect of it. Maybe there's too many people that have lost compared to gain, or maybe too many gains that are masking a loss. And so that kind of gives us the background.
So could you give me a practical example of how we've applied that, and is something we've been able to do differently as a business?
Yeah, so I guess within our kind of tests around how we improve search, you can sometimes make a change, and a certain kind of group of people respond really well to it, and they do loads and loads and loads more, and then you'll have a different group that will actually not do much at all, and they completely turn off. And so without looking at the distribution and seeing that you've got that split, it can be very confusing to interpret the results if you've only got the average response, and you can miss that. So that's been really, really important for kind of helping guide where we want to go next with our work and kind of evolution of search.
Yeah. For that specific example, we actually looked at that data and were able to say, okay, we need to tweak the algorithm, and then doing so led to, I think, a pretty positive result on that test. I won't say numbers because I might get censored, but want to make sure I don't say anything I shouldn't. But we had a pretty nice live test result afterwards where we realized we looked beyond the mean. We looked at the visitors. We looked at everyone. We found that there was some interesting dynamics going on. We fixed it, or we tried to kind of account for that. And then the ending result was a better, that is currently in production, sort order.
And within our data science community, like the idea to like work on this and go like, I think we've got a better idea for doing this that will deliver some, you know, meaningful, tangible results to the business. How does that go about? Do you have a portion of your time that is, you know, that you can work on, you know, things that are more like research in nature?
I mean, I think that like my recollection of it is Dustin called me over and was like, I'm not trusting some of these error bars that we have in our analysis package. I'm like, yeah, and then like that ends up in a discussion, and then slightly classic academia related. I think we both went home and did not sleep, and then kind of like there must be something here. And I think we both came in the next day and had similar-ish like ideas. We'd approach it from like different angles. Yeah. Justin's was a lot more elegant than mine. Mine was more classic physicist. Like I'm going to hack together a bunch of different distributions and make it work. Justin's was far nicer in the approach that was written up. But yeah, sometimes there's a problem and you're just like, oh, that's just annoying me, and I really, really want to figure it out. But then, yeah, we do also have some time to kind of discuss things. We have kind of regular catch-ups within the team, and you know, you can raise things. It's like, oh, we're not doing this, or like, has anyone looked at like this that's come out, or like some people have written a paper on that, and it's like, oh, that looks really interesting. Like that could actually work for us. And you have a little play and see if it has legs, and then if it does, then yeah, you can then take that wider. But I think it's a natural part of the role that kind of like, ooh, that looks fun, and you just explore it.
And so there's lots of other people around the business who do A/B testing or interact with A/B testing in some degree, and they are not computational astrophysicists or neuroscientists. How do you explain to like people like myself, without like a maths background, like what this is and how it's going to be different?
Yeah, so we really boil down the outputs to kind of like, this is the risk, and this is the chance that this is better than that. Which actually sounds like a very simple metric, but your classic like frequentist structure, which is like the more typical way to do A/B testing, is kind of like the more standard approach. Like you don't actually get an answer to that question, which feels a little bit interesting. It's like, you know, what's the chance that A is better than B? So that's something that our approach does. And then we capture something called risk, which is essentially like, if we make the wrong decision, how bad is that? And that is something that we can then communicate with all the people involved and kind of go, right, these are like the two core numbers that if, you know, you can ignore all the graphs and the plots, but like these are the two core things. And then I guess it becomes more Arjo and everyone else within the analytics community to kind of like really make sure that everything is looking good and stable. But yeah, we can condense it down to basically two numbers.
I found that quite luckily, or maybe we're just lucky with Dave Sykes here, they're remarkably understanding of the underlying mathematics. We don't go into the heavy details. Like if you read the paper, there's multivariable integration over a special math thing called a simplex, which is just, you don't need to know that.
I got a 90-second podcast summary of the paper.
Yeah. Did it mention the simplex?
It didn't, no.
Okay.
It glazed over those details.
Yeah, that's probably for the best. But when you try and explain all these complicated concepts and all these crazy things, I think just a simple color-coded graph, like that's as simple as possible, and even like a GIF. I've made some animated GIFs that explain. It's incredibly great to understand how random procedures work. It kind of gets people the intuition and the understanding, and just a nice, pretty thing to look at as it loops. And that goes so far towards getting an understanding and towards the intuition. And then we can take that intuition and build upon it and speak with them in their language of like risk and reward and things.
So you had a great idea, sleepless night, pitched an idea to a team, like came up with a new model, implemented it with like commercial success at Autotrader. Great. So like what was in it for you and for Autotrader to commit the time, which was presumably more late nights, to write that up as a paper, publish it, go and kind of share it with the broader statistical community?
I think it's just very nice to kind of like share what you've done, like having to write it up, and this is something you definitely get on the academic side. Like when you have to commit something to paper, and write it, like, you really need to understand it to be able to do that, right? Like that process highlights so many things like, oh, I hadn't thought of that, or like, we should double check this, and that is really helpful just by itself. But then also, like, we don't do this in isolation, right? We've read plenty of textbooks, we read plenty of papers, right? Those are all other people, like, putting things out there just because it's useful to know. So in that sense, it feels nice to be able to, like, contribute something back too.
Yeah, it's all part of this Autotrader community type of outreach and building, and like communities aren't just local, they're not just national, they can be subsets and niches of, here's all these weird nerds that like A/B testing, here's a paper, maybe you'll like it. And I will go to people and be like, hey, have you considered some Dirichlet posteriors? And they're like, what does that mean? And then we have a nice conversation. I think it's nice. they might not. But it's part of that back and forth and that communication. What's really nice is that when you build that community, people are comfortable coming to you and saying, no, I think that's wrong. And I really want to know if it's wrong, because I don't want to then go to Autotrader and say, like, here's this thing, we think it's right, but we don't know. Instead, I want to go to Autotrader and say, here's this thing, a bunch of our peers have said, yeah, we don't see any flaws with it. And then we can be very comfortable that we can roll it out to all the analyst team, and they won't, be led astray by our thoughts and ideas.
Well, talking communities, we've got a bunch of people in the room here who I'm sure would love to ask you some questions about whether it's galaxies or Dirichlet posteriors. So should we take some time to open the floor to questions?
Not all at once.
So when you went and present, how did you present your paper then? Was that something you just send off and then people feed it back, or is it something where you have to go and present your work externally for scrutiny and mean people to poke holes in it?
You want to take this one?
Yeah, so there's, this is getting deep into the weeds of academic publishing standards. There is a online repository for knowledge in PDFs called Archive, A-R-X-I-V, almost called it K, that allows you to publish papers that are preprint or kind of before you kind of give it to a big conference. We published we put it on that as a kind of a way to give the paper out to anyone who wants to look at it via just a website link. And then we sent it off to the Royal Siskel Society as a talk, and they had to say, okay, this has merit, this is worthy of like us talking about it. And then they accepted our proposal for a talk. We went to Edinburgh about a month or two ago, presented our discussion to them in about 20 minutes or so, to a bunch of industry AB people. And then they had a bunch of questions, made a few contacts there. Luckily, they were very nice, which surprised both of us. I think both of our fields were very much the, like you go up to give your PhD thesis, and you're like, please don't hurt me, like I did my best. And then someone who's been doing research longer than you've been alive stands up and asks a question that's just like, why do you exist? Like, why have you decided to do the stupidest thing? And you're like, I don't know, I tried. But luckily, Edinburgh RSS was really great. They had a lot of really nice questions, nice ideas, and it was nice. So that process was just a weird little mix of submitting to different places.
And sorry, a related question then. You said you wanted to get it like peer reviewed before you and you roll it out to analysts. So how did you get that initial peer review? Was that via the uploading it to the online PDF-y thing? Is that where you got the peers either poking holes or suggesting?
Yeah, so that's I think my inner paranoia coming out. I sent it to a whole bunch of people that didn't request it. And then I said, what do you think? And luckily there were quite a few people that were like, here's why it's wrong. And that was great, because then I would say, okay, cool. And then I would go through simulations, go through results, present them back the findings, and they're like, oh, I guess you're right. Like, oh, I guess that does actually have merit. And so I think pretty much the entire results section, so the last 12 pages of the paper, was because someone mentioned like, oh, you didn't do this. And I'm like, yeah. So then we added 12 more pages, and they're like, okay, good. everything's good now. So it's just the community and just, going out.
And final one, and we'll hand it over. So was your first iteration or your first major iteration on it right, or did you have to tweak your model based on any feedback?
I think the biggest thing that we had to change was, quantiles. Should we get into that?
We can briefly get into quantiles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to briefly get into quantiles?
Yeah, go on.
Okay. We made a fundamental assumption that invalidated some of the models, And it was through writing the paper and running these simulations that we realized, oh, this thing that we're proposing to do needs to be tweaked in a very specific way for it to actually work as it's intended. And it was through the process of you and I sitting down writing out the mathematics that we're like, wait a minute, what we're doing practically right now needs to be shifted. And so then we just went back and reran all the experiments that we had already run, and it was the exact same, so it's fine. But there was actually a moment where we're like, uh-oh. There was a moment.
So my question is about your time before Autotrader. Dustin, what did you learn about mice in playgrounds having food thrown at them? And Tom, how much do galaxies weigh?
The general idea of the whole impetus behind mice is that we're trying to understand how people, and we just assume that a mouse is a person for this, navigate 3 dimensions. And you might notice this, but mice don't fly. And so a lot of our lab meetings were like, how do we get a mouse to fly? I had come from an engineering school, so like we could give them jetpacks. But that wasn't feasible or ethical. So instead, we had to ask, what can we do to approximate 3-dimensional movement? And so we settled on playgrounds and all these kind of movements around multiple spaces. And the thing that we learned is that whenever you're trying to move in 3-dimensional spaces, and we're hoping this applies to humans, you don't actually move in 3 dimensions. You move in 2 dimensions and then change which 2 dimensions you're moving in at any given moment to fit the thing. So it's like you hit a climbing wall. You're walking on the ground, that's your 2-dimensional space, but then you get to the climbing wall and now your 2-dimensional space is right in front of you, and then you go up. And your brain will automatically flip to map the plane of your traversal. We think. We think.
Yeah, and then in terms of galaxy clusters, somewhere between 10 to the 14 and 10 to the 15 solar masses is
That was my guess.
the answer. Yeah, yeah. So to put that in context, like the Milky Way galaxy is 200,000 solar masses. So a solar mass is just the mass of the sun, and these galaxy clusters have about 1,000 Milky Ways worth of stuff just swirling around, often crashing into each other. One of the main things I was looking at, basically galaxies would fall into the cluster and then be stripped of all the gas and stuff around them as they fall in, fling around the center and then come back out, and then they would oscillate and just gently just coming closer and closer to the center of the cluster. And that was really important for actually getting an accurate mass measurement of it all. But yeah, you get these lovely pretty trails of galaxies just being stripped of everything as they fall into this. It's literally 10 million degree plasma that they're falling into. It's quite fun.
That's probably quite a nice segue into my last question, which is, if there's anyone listening to this that is in academia, is deep in whatever area of mathematics they're in there, but is wondering, God, I wonder if there's jobs in the real world where I can still apply my passion for maths. What advice would you have for them?
I think, and particularly if you're currently doing a PhD or in that kind of research field, finding a way to apply, say, machine learning techniques to what you already know. You will already be one of the top people in the world who understands that specific thing that you're studying right now. So finding a way to apply some kind of common techniques to it, that's how I did it, and I managed to turn that into a paper. So I was fairly fortunate in that regard. And I think as well, you're already set up quite well. You're used to handling fairly big problems. Literally, the reason why you're doing the PhD or the postdoc is because we don't know this. No one knows this, and you've got to try and figure that out. And so already that skill that has been honed is incredibly valuable. And it's a case of turning it to something a bit more in quote real. But yeah, that's how I did it. I applied the new thing, the machine learning and the more data science techniques, to the thing that I already knew, and that was a very useful combination.
Cool. If you're a mathematician and you're looking for a job in industry, then my advice would be apply to Autotrader. We've got some interesting problems that we're trying to solve, and we need some pretty brilliant people to help solve them. So
Great plug.
Yeah.
Jane will be very happy. So, I mean, that's all we've got time for today. I found that absolutely fascinating. So to Tom, Dustin, thank you very much for joining us today. If you've enjoyed today's podcast, don't forget to follow, subscribe, like, share wherever you get your podcasts, and go to the Autotraders jobs page. I'm sure Tom and Dustin will hear from you soon. Thank you very much.